Ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. It's finally happening. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. To my super chat, thank you for your support. Your super chat is so greatly appreciated. If you want to talk about the upcoming indictments or anything pertaining to politics via super chat, I'd be honored to have a discussion with you. Your super chat is greatly appreciated. Let's get started. Democracy docket. Trump organizing, or DOJ organizing vast conspiracy against enemies. This was 3 days ago, but the New York Times ex-CIA chief wants to block Judge Cannon in Florida. Of course, Brennan does not want a judge that found Jack Smith to be unconstitutional. They have no problem. I mean, it's unbelievable how judges and courts that tried to convict Trump, or that did in New York, which will be overturned by the Supreme Court. A state cannot level a federal election commission crime against anyone without the DOJ and FEC involved. But anyway, it's unbelievable, the conflicts of interest and the fact that most of the judges that went after Trump have a litany of favorable rulings towards Democrats that helped Democrats, but that didn't stop. I mean, nobody was forced to recuse themselves. And now you have Brennan trying to get a judge, the DOJ, to not choose a judge he doesn't like. But Brennan is going to be indicted, and so will almost certainly Madam Secretary. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. It's all over the news right now. It's just not front and center. People will get indicted. Hillary Clinton, almost certainly, along with Brennan, Comey, and others, will be indicted under conspiracy statutes. DOJ organizing vast conspiracy against enemies. A grand jury in Florida has already convened. The Justice Department is looking into the fact that CNN, Hillary Clinton personally approved plan to share Trump-Russia allegations with press in 2016. Campaign manager testified. Her own campaign manager is going to be one of the reasons that she's eventually indicted. Former Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook says Clinton agreed to give Trump-Russia material to a reporter. This was during the Durham probe. Now, the Durham probe annex has been declassified. You'll see that in a second. CNN, FEC finds Hillary Clinton campaign and DNC over Trump-Russia dossier. AP News, DNC Clinton campaign agreed to steal dossier fine. They paid a fine for a dossier they filtered through the U.S. government illegally. Nothing was legal about the Steele dossier. Now, this is the Durham probe annex. John Durham's declassified, the information that's been declassified now pertaining to the Clinton campaign and others, their efforts to set up and frame Trump. So if you look, the classified appendix forms part of the report on matters related to intelligence activities. This section further provides further background about possible Clinton campaign plan described in the office's report. The office's efforts to verify or refute the information about the plan, the manner in which the department officials received and acted on. Okay, so you have classified by John Durham. This is pertaining to the plan to set up and frame Trump. We can get into it a little later. But these are actual conversations and a bunch of information that's been declassified on Democrats, not just Clinton, literally conspiring to set up and frame Trump. There was not a shred of evidence that Russia ever wanted Trump. The whole thing was completely outlandish. That's why John Brennan has already been referred for criminal prosecution. I do believe Clinton has. But this is the declassified ODNI report that talks about how there was no intelligence that the Russians wanted Trump. The whole thing was fabricated. In fact, the intelligence showed that there was no intelligence. That's what the intelligence showed. The original intelligence community assessment stated that there was no Trump-Russia. And of course, because Clinton had top secret intelligence flying around on servers, Comey wrote the Comey letter because classified data was being forwarded to Uma Abedin from Clinton's computer. They had a classified data debacle. Actually, it was a cybersecurity debacle the greatest cybersecurity nightmare of all time. And so they set up and framed Trump. But check this out, ladies and gentlemen. This is the beginning of the conspiracy statutes. This is the basis. I just showed you public record and declassified documents that have been declassified by Chuck Grassley, by John Radcliffe, CIA, and by especially Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. Now you'll hear Tulsi Gabbard talking about this. This will serve as the basis for conspiracy statute indictments. They conspired to set up and frame Trump. Why do you think Democrats lost 2 of the past 3 elections? Probably 3, but whatever. 2 of the past 3. Why do you think they lost 2 of the past 3? Because they've been lying to their constituents for 10 years. Check it out. Hit subscribe if you're new. By the way, we will have live streams around 10 a.m., around 4:30 p.m., and around tonight around 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And then right after this live stream, go to H.A. Goodman's other channel. I will have an upload, so corresponding upload to the live streams here. Hit subscribe if you're new. Thanks, everybody. And Happy New Year to everybody. God bless you all.
And we begin this Sunday morning with the biggest political scandal of all, collusion and conspiracy at the highest levels against President Trump. Now, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard revealing what this audience has.
By the way, Paul Bartlett in Australia, thank you so very much. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year, my friend. Thank you and for your support. My goodness, Paul has been absolutely wonderful. And thank you, everybody, for your support over the years via Super Chat. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Paul, thank you so much. I can never thank you enough. Thank you, Paul. And Happy New Year to you and your family.
As known all along, a cabal of high-ranking officials led by then-President Barack Obama, CIA Director John Brennan, and Hillary Clinton, among others, took the world on a wild goose chase to try and take down their political enemy, Donald Trump, no matter the casualties along the way. DNA Tulsi Gabbard is now calling for prosecutions, revealing declassified documents from the Russia collusion made-up investigation, which she says detail a treasonous conspiracy by officials at the highest level of the Obama White House to stop incoming President Donald Trump. The cabal included Barack Obama, John Brennan, James Clapper, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Jim Comey, and Susan Rice, who pushed a made-up story that President Trump colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. So the cabal was...
It was completely fabricated. There was no truth to it at all. Not a shred of evidence. Whenever they say, well, what about this? What about that? The Uranium One scandal has far more ties, collusion, interference, implication. There's a money trail. Innuendo, conjecture, hyperbole, suspicion. I mean, everything. Well, what's Trump hiding? Why did this happen? Why did he change his foreign policy? Because he was a new incoming president. That's why you would have an incoming president that's different from the incumbent. That's why you choose a president every 4 years. That's, people wanted President Trump's foreign policy. It wasn't because the Russians had catapulted him. Also, in addition to Robbie Mook's testimony in the Durham probe, you have Democrats within Clinton's campaign writing via emails that they wanted to elevate Trump. So how on earth could Clinton's campaign, this is from the DNC emails, how on earth could Clinton's campaign want Trump to be the nominee and the Russians at the same time? Does that mean the Clinton campaign was working alongside the Russians? Does that mean the Russians were actually utilizing the Clinton campaign before they lost? Before the Clinton campaign then blamed Russia for wanting the same thing that they did, which is to elevate Trump? The DNC wanted to elevate President Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Dr. Ben Carson. The whole thing was an entire setup. It was so outlandish also. But anyway, let's continue.
Would not lose their grip on power. All of this exactly as then Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, Judiciary Committee member John Ratcliffe, and President Trump himself told us so many times from day one.
What that is it's the original intelligence, the original reasons that the counterintelligence investigation was started. Now, this is really important to us because a counterintelligence investigation uses the tools of our intelligence services that are not supposed to be used on American citizens. So we've long wanted to know, well, what intelligence did you have that actually led to this investigation? So what we found now, after the investigators have reviewed it, is that, in fact, there was no intelligence.
As a former federal prosecutor, my opinion is that declassifying them would not expose any national security information, would not expose any sources and methods. It would expose certain folks at the Obama Justice Department and FBI and their actions taken to conceal material facts from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
How involved was John Brennan?
Totally involved. He was totally involved. John Brennan was one of the architects, in my opinion. You look at Brennan, you look at Clapper, you look at them all. But ultimately, the president knew everything. The president knew everything. President Obama and Vice President Biden, they knew everything.
And Comey and Brennan and Clapper, they all were terrible, and they lied to Congress. They spied on my campaign, which is treason. They spied both before and after I won.
And so they did spy. It isn't treason, but the way the media works is the way President Trump and media work are very interesting. President Trump is going to take something that's true. And what he'll do is he'll say the crime associated is treasonous. Well, the crime associated is a conspiracy statute. It's not necessarily treason. Treason is handing over, classified data to an enemy. That's an example of that crime. Okay, or during a war or during some kind of conflict. This is a conspiracy statute. These are conspiracy. So President Trump will state that it's even more egregious, which is already terrible to begin with. This is how democracy dies in darkness. This is how this is how the republic or the Constitution or the fabric of our nation is imperiled. This is how this is an authoritarian, totalitarian. Like, this is what a fascist would do: set up and frame an innocent man. Trump was an innocent man. The totalitarians, the authoritarians, the people who were despotic, everything that Democrats claim their adversaries are, the people who are truly despotic set up and framed President Trump. But what President Trump is saying is, look, they spied, and this is an example of treason. Well, it's not an example of treason, but these are all felonies. These are all terrible things that a country cannot, survive very long if it takes place, all the time or every 4 years. And the way media works is no, there was no spying. Technically it wasn't an example of espionage or spying on the campaign. And it's like, okay, they did. They infiltrated President Trump's campaign. They did so via computers. They did so via a bunch of different methods. And they recorded phone calls, all these things. And so, like, for example, they set up and framed General Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn's phone was tapped, and he had a conversation with the Russian foreign minister, and there was no criminal. The FBI looked at it. It was published in the Washington Post that there was no criminality. Nothing was found that was criminal. That's just one example. Then they set up and framed him with that meeting with McCabe and the other agents. But then they use a dossier to filter it through. They filtered it through a dossier through the U.S. government. And Comey lied almost certainly, and Brennan numerous times, along with Comey, saying, "Oh, they didn't know what the dossier was about." Well, we have all the declassified documents now. And everyone's going to get indicted in 2026.
Listen, it's called Connect.
Joining me now is the woman herself, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Director, thanks very much for being here this morning.
Good morning, Maria. Thank you.
What was the most damning thing that you learned after looking through all of these declassified documents?
Maria, the implications of this are frankly nothing short of historic. Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office, after President Trump had already gotten elected. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue that is so serious it should concern every single American, because it has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. What we saw occur here, as the documents we released detailed, was that we had a sitting president of the United States and his cabinet and leadership team, quite frankly, who were not happy with the fact that President Trump had won the election, that the American people had chosen Donald J. Trump to be the next president, commander-in-chief of the United States. And so they decided that they would do everything possible to try to undermine his ability to do what voters tasked President Trump to do. So creating this piece of manufactured intelligence that claims that Russia had helped Donald Trump get elected contradicted every other assessment that had been made previously in the months leading up to the election that said exactly the opposite, that Russia had neither the intent nor the capability to try to, quote unquote, hack the United States election for the presidency of the United States. So the effect of what President Obama and his senior national security team did was subvert the will of the American people, undermining our democratic republic, and enacting what would be essentially a years-long coup against President Trump, who was duly elected by the American people.
They could not stand that President Trump won in 2016. We're still living in 2016, okay? We're living under a cloud of 2016. Until people get indicted and convicted for what took place in 2016, the country's political climate will be in turmoil. What happened was Trump, and I was saying, along with very few others, that Trump would win, that Clinton was going to lose. And of course, the smartest people in the room were wrong, as always. Almost always, the wonderful, morally superior, highly educated experts are wrong about something grandiose. And all the polls and all the smartest people said Clinton would win in a landslide. Oh, my God. And the Clinton campaign emails, or the DNC emails published by everybody in the New York Times, Politico, what they stated was that they wanted to elevate Pied Piper candidates, Dr. Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, and Donald Trump. That's what the Clinton campaign and the DNC wanted to do. This was before they lost. How on earth could they have wanted to elevate Trump? And if you believe the fabricated intelligence, the Russians also wanted to elevate Trump during that time period as well. How could both the Russians and the Clinton and DNC, the Clinton campaigns and DNC, both want to elevate Trump? Does that make any sense to anybody? And so then they changed their tune when they lost. And they utilized a Steele dossier that was completely fabricated. It was not opposition research. It was specifically purchased to tarnish a candidate, to actually create a Cold War, Red Scare, McCarthy-era hysteria. There are people who still believe that Russia interfered and wanted Trump. But they didn't interfere. Not one vote was altered. So, I mean, you could use the word, maybe Russia interfered. You could say, well, Russia interfered. What does interference mean? It's a broad, vague, ambiguous term. Well, they purchased Twitter bots and Facebook ads, but where is the evidence that Democrats were afraid or concerned about these Russian Twitter bots or Facebook ads? Because you never saw people that were more arrogant, full of not just overconfident, the hubris, the arrogance was unbelievable. They didn't think they were going to lose. They thought Trump was going to win up until the last second. That's why people were shedding tears and crying and weeping at the Jacob Javits Center because it was like a shock to their system. They couldn't believe it. So how could then Russia have interfered in such a manner that not even one vote, according to the NSA, was altered? They didn't alter even one vote. And yet Clinton had Uma Abedin was forwarding classified data to Anthony Weiner. And that's why Comey wrote the Comey letter. They cheated Bernie Sanders. And Bernie, of course, said nothing because he's part of that corrupt system. If he cared so much about Medicare for all and the working class, he would have stated, hey, you don't even have functioning primaries. And they cheated him 4 years later. I mean, it's such a racket, it's unbelievable. But this is how they keep talking about the Republic and the Constitution and democracy. This is the antithesis of democracy. Setting up and framing an incoming candidate because you lost. That's exactly what took place.
Yeah. Now, I want to go back to something Devin Nunes said, which is exactly what you're saying right now. And he said, after all of our investigation, we found that there was no intelligence. There was no intelligence actually indicating that Trump colluded with Russia. And what happened? Because there was a presidential daily briefing that was presented to President Obama every day. And every day it said the same thing. We have no evidence of collusion. We have no evidence that Russia did this with Donald Trump. So what happened? How did they actually get the public to believe, and half the public believed, that actually Trump did collude?
Well, this is the thing, Maria, when you look at the assessments that were made, not just by one element of the intelligence community, but in my role as the director of national intelligence, I oversee 18 different intelligence community elements. And in the months leading up to the November 2016 election, the intelligence community agreed that there was no intelligence that reflected that Russia was trying to hack the election in favor of either candidate. The evidence showed, the intelligence showed that, again, Russia did not have either the intent nor the capability to be able to impact the outcome of the United States election. So it was very striking when we look back again at the documents that I declassified and released that shows there was a shift. In early December, the first week of December, again, another document was produced by the intelligence community, a president's daily brief that was consistent with every other assessment that was done previously leading up to the election. Russia did not, this is after the election now, did not attempt to affect the outcome of the American election. That was never published. Hours before it would have gone into President Obama's President's Daily Brief, it was pulled by a senior level intelligence official saying that they had to pull it because they had received new guidance. The very next day, this meeting was called, a National Security Council meeting, bringing together all of the senior leaders of President Obama's cabinet, and the topic that was put forward was a sensitive matter. The tasks that came out of that meeting was coming from President Obama directing the intelligence community, then Obama's ODNI director Clapper, to produce a document, to produce an intelligence assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow affected the outcome of the election that had already occurred, electing Donald Trump to the presidency. This document that they published in January of 2017 was the foundational groundwork that they continued to reference over and over and over again to enact this years-long coup against President Trump.
Now, I know that Devin Nunes came out with the Nunes report and a lot of other reports.
Community assessment that President Obama ordered be published, which contained a manufactured intelligence document. It's worse than even politicization of intelligence. It was manufactured intelligence that sought to achieve President Obama and his team's objective, which was undermining President Trump's presidency and subverting the will of the American people. So yes, next week we will be releasing more detailed information about how exactly this took place and the extent to which this information was sought to be hidden from the American people, hidden from officials who would be in a position to do something about it. And that's really the point here that I think is most important, Maria, and you said it in your opening. Accountability is essential for the future of our country, for the American people to have any sense of trust in the integrity of our democratic republic. Accountability, action, prosecution, indictments for those who are responsible for trying to steal our democracy is essential for us to make sure that this never happens to our country again.
Yeah, and I want to get to that right now because I've heard talk of a criminal referral. Are you referring this in a criminal matter?
We are referring all of the documents that we have uncovered to the Department of Justice and the FBI for a criminal referral.
Yeah. And do you believe that we will see prosecutions? I mean, our audience wants to know where this story goes from here. Will we ever see anyone held accountable for this incredible lie on the American people?
I will do all that I can, and we have whistleblowers, actually, Maria, coming forward now after we release these documents, because there are people who were around, who were working within the intelligence community at this time, who were so disgusted by what happened. We're starting to see some of them come out of the woodwork here because they, too, like you and I and the American people, want to see justice delivered. So we're going to provide everything that we have, everything that we will continue to gather to the Department of Justice for that direct intent and that direct.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is those are the conspiracy statutes that she's referring to. Okay, they have these. It's really funny. It's been a long time, 10 years. It took 10 years for us to get to this point. But Rome wasn't built in a day. And everybody watching, me, you, President Trump, much more than you and I want justice. He wants people to be indicted for setting up and framing him. The problem, however, is that you have so many people invested in this lie, which, by the way, actually makes it easier to indict people and convict people on conspiracy statutes because they're so invested. There are whistleblowers now, in addition to declassified documents. It's being talked about. The conspiracy statutes are in Florida now. The grand jury is in Florida, not a blue state that will protect Democrats at all costs. It's a completely different ballgame. You have now Brennan facing indictment. You have the DNI, all the ODNI information declassified. And I mean, this is like, this is all the information they will use to indict and convict people like Brennan and ultimately Clinton and Comey. So they're not just going to go after people for lying, which they did with impunity for so many years. The conspiracy statute, the same statutes they leveled against Trump, which was amusing, because they tried to say that Trump fomented a rebellion, which is completely absurd. The Supreme Court unanimously overturned the Colorado State Supreme Court conviction or ballot decision. They wanted to kick Trump off the ballot. They wanted to imprison him for decades. Everything was fabricated. That's why he won again. So when they bring up, well, this person was indicted, and these indictments, and the Russia probe led to these indictments, and Trump had charities that didn't. It's like nothing compares to the Clinton Foundation likely graft and bribery, or within the Hunter's lap or Biden's laptop. Nothing. Everybody knows that's why Trump won again. Why do you think Trump won 2 times? He's the second president we've had with non-consecutive terms. Because we had to live through 4 years of Biden. Trump won, very likely, if things were fair and square, would have won again. Then we had 4 years of Biden after the first Trump administration. We suffered through that. And then President Trump won again after there was an attempt on his life, 2 attempts. And one where a firefighter lost his life. And they're like, oh, I was watching, so you don't have to. I was watching MSNBC the other day, just on the phone, just to see what they're still talking about. And they're going through and they're saying, "Oh, Trump and his CFO or his, is in prison now." I was like, yeah, they went after everyone they could for infractions or for technicalities that they would never level against Democrats. They treated Trump and everyone around Trump in a manner they never would have treated Democratic politicians. The Clinton Foundation was investigated for like 2 seconds in New York. And there's endless scandal associated with that. So everybody knows the system was skewed against Trump, and the system favored 50 intel officials, for example, protected Hunter and Biden, well, mainly Biden, but we couldn't even talk about any social media algorithms. We couldn't even talk about Hunter's laptop. Nobody could. They'd be deplatformed in 2 seconds, 6 years ago. So things have changed. And this year, we'll talk about when it happens. Watch this channel, because I have been talking to you about this for a long, long time, ladies and gentlemen.
Correct purpose. There must be indictments. Those responsible, no matter how powerful they are and were at that time, no matter who was involved in creating this treasonous conspiracy against the American people, they all must be held accountable.
So do you expect, just to be clear, do you expect indictments and prosecutions?
You may already know that creatine is one of the most proven.
I'm not a lawyer. In my view, we have the evidence to be able to move forward and bring about justice, yes, to prosecute and indict those responsible.
And I want to really put a spotlight on who's responsible, because we've talked about the highest levels. Barack Obama, John Brennan, James Clapper. But we also have to look at things like, you just found all of this. Why didn't Durham find it? Why didn't Mueller find it?
Because you didn't have information declassified. You didn't have John Ratcliffe at the CIA. And you didn't have, America didn't have Tulsi Gabbard as the director of national intelligence. All the people, the system that set up and framed Trump was still intact. You had FBI officials literally defending people convicted of crimes during the Durham probe. So it's like you were never going to get a conviction. But what John Durham did, and he is amazing, he did something very important for in American history, for future generations, and for America today. He compiled all the evidence needed for future prosecutions. So 5-6 years ago, when they less than 5 years ago, 2022, 2023, when Clinton herself also, and Brennan and others testified before John Durham in closed door testimony, they almost certainly lied under oath. So that's part of the endless indictments all these people will receive. It's completely obvious they lied. When they get indicted, oh my God, the Washington Post, New York Times, all of it, Atlantic, oh, this is Trump, he's a despot, he's authoritarian. The more hyperbolic they get, the better for Trump. They don't get it. They're so, it's like, they're so inept, it's unbelievable. They're so inept, it's unbelievable. Let's continue.
Okay, what about the FISA judges? Because when you look at this seditious conspiracy aimed at overthrowing the U.S. government and an elected president, you have to consider also the black robes. You've got to look at the FISA judges. And how about the fact that the judge who gave a slap on the wrist to Kevin Kleinsmith, who was the FBI agent who lied on an official document about Carter Page, who was spied on for a year, that judge is Judge James Boasberg. He's still at his desk, and he's still trying to stop Donald Trump's agenda. So what about the broader group of people that are also involved?
Maria, this is of such historic consequence that it cannot be limited to 1 or 2 or 3 different people. You just outlined the implications and the effects of what actually occurred, and I think you're really putting into a clear picture what we are referring to when we refer to the deep state. It is very far-reaching. These are people who are intent on undermining the will of the American people and trying to ultimately put themselves above our democracy. And this is why it's so important that we continue down this path. We continue to stay very focused. I question the same things that you're asking here. I don't know how it is. Yes, I put my team on this. We've been working on this over the last few months. I've been in this role as Director of National Intelligence for just about 6 months. I don't know what excuse there is for those who supposedly investigated this previously, whether it was Durham or others, that they were not able to put together the dots and ultimately show the truth to the American people. President Trump has delivered a maximum transparency mandate, and this is exactly what we're doing. The American people need to see the truth, and we're going to continue to do that every single day that I'm here.
Equally outrageous was the fact that we had the handwritten notes of John Brennan. I reported on it at the time. The CIA reported to President Obama that the Russians were aware that Hillary Clinton had come up with this idea to blame the Russians and working with Trump to win the election. And we actually saw his handwritten notes. So there's that evidence that, again, all of those people who were supposedly special counsels, independent counsels, blew off, right? Robert Mueller, John Durham.
That's right. I really cannot fathom. There is no rational or logical explanation for why they failed. The only logical conclusion that I can draw in this, Maria, is what you're implying here directly, is that there was direct intent to cover up the truth about what occurred and who was responsible, and the broad network of how this seditious conspiracy was concocted and who exactly was responsible for carrying it out.
So at the end of the day, we need to look at Pam Bondi. Is that the person who at the end of the day is going to bring us accountability? Pam Bondi?
Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, it is their responsibility to gather all of the evidence, both that we have released, the facts that have already been known previously, the information that will continue to come out, and move forward with this prosecution and these indictments.
All right. We are on it, and we'll be watching.
So that's going to happen this year. Potentially, I have no clue, or I have no information as to when, but possibly January or February or March. It'll happen early this year, almost certainly. This is not difficult. The DOJ just simply has to, make sure it doesn't repeat any mistakes, the same mistakes that took place with Comey's initial indictment. Okay, with a prosecutor that a judge can say, you're not really lawfully appointed. Hopefully, that actually was probably was a Pyrrhic victory for Democrats or for Comey, and that will only serve to ensure that Pam Bondi and the DOJ do everything above board and in the most thorough manner possible with this upcoming trial. The entire planet knows that Russia didn't work with Trump. That is a stupid, completely outlandish, fabricated story. It's not only a hoax, you'd have to be a complete imbecile to believe that the Clinton campaign, the DNC, in their own emails, wanted Trump, but then when they lost, they didn't want Trump anymore, and it was the Russians that wanted Trump. Okay, that's what you'd have to believe. And furthermore, not even back then, the NSA stated, under President Obama's NSA, that not one vote was altered by the Russians. So their entire argument is that the Russians hacked the DNC, which is also completely absurd, but the Russians hacked the DNC to inform the country of how corrupt Democrats are, thus influencing voters to vote Trump because of his foreign policy. But it's the DNC that cheated Bernie Sanders. It's Clinton that had top secret intelligence on servers. It's Comey that stated that intent. He didn't think that Clinton intentionally used servers. to hide information. Inherent in owning a private server is the desire to hide information. You'd have to be, again, a complete imbecile not to understand that. The entire world knows that people like Comey and Brennan and all the others wanted to help Hillary Clinton. This is not rocket science. Everyone knows this. They can pretend to be, these good, ethical, upstanding, but they're no different than, a public relations executive for the Democratic Party. Just like when journalists say, we found this scoop on Trump. It's like, probably nonsense. And you're, again, a public relations executive for the Democratic Party. That's why President Trump won twice. They still don't understand why Trump won. Ladies and gentlemen, you do realize they don't know why President Trump won again. The Democrats do not understand why. And I don't even think Brennan and Comey and others, they don't realize why President Trump won. He won because he said he was going to enforce immigration laws, but mainly because he's going to unleash the potential of the U.S. economy, tariffs, bringing jobs back to the country, and addressing outsourcing, and mainly limiting never-ending wars. Does that mean he's a pacifist? No, he's not a pacifist. But the Bush-Obama foreign policy, nobody wanted. Really, it was foreign policy that catapulted Trump to 2 terms. And the fact that he's not going, like, we just found an $8 billion scandal in Minnesota. I mean, that's just maybe the tip of the iceberg. But all of these things, this fantasy world that the wonderful, morally superior, highly educated Democrats live within, where, the moral, the ladies at the View and Hollywood and all these people can pontificate and preach and judge and condemn and lecture. It's like Trump shattered all of that. That's another reason he won. And thank God he did.
CIA Director John Lee Ratcliffe worked on this in Congress and again as DNI and joins us now. Welcome, Director. I sat beside you as Comey and Brennan were questioned for hours about Russia collusion. They never once mentioned this was a Clinton campaign plan. They knew it. They were co-conspirators. Would this ever have come out had you not declassified Brennan's notes and then Durham's annex? And for our viewers, what's new in the Durham annex?
Well, Trey, think about that there was intelligence from foreign intelligence services that one U.S. presidential candidate was trying to frame another candidate for treason, claiming that he was an agent of a foreign power, an agent of Russia. And that intelligence was never shared with you or I as members of congressional oversight committees on intelligence. But for the good fortune of me being able to find John Brennan's notes and declassify that secret may have been hidden forever. But I was able to provide that to John Durham, and you see some of that in his annex that was declassified this week. And so what you learned in this annex that many people didn't know before was details of that Hillary Clinton plan and how it included groups like the Soros Foundation and the role that the FBI played. So before all of this started, Trey, what we did know was this, that on July 31st of 2016, the FBI did something as shocking as it was unprecedented. They opened a criminal investigation into a nominee for president, a candidate for President Donald Trump, something that had never been done before. But what you learned in John Brennan's annex this week was 6 days before that, Russian intelligence predicted that's exactly what would happen, that there was a Hillary Clinton plan and that the FBI would pour oil on the fire of a firestorm that would consume the country for the next 3 years. So think about that, Trey. Either the Russians made the greatest prediction or the luckiest guess of all time, or this intelligence was real. And of course, the answer is this intelligence was real. And how do we know that? Well, subsequently, under penalty of perjury, while under oath, Hillary Clinton's own campaign manager confirmed that there was such a plan and that Hillary approved it. So that, I think, in addition to what you learn about the FBI's role that came out this week, was that this intelligence that was so shocking that
And so here's the CBS News article. Former Clinton campaign manager says Clinton agreed to give Trump Russia material to a reporter. So they were working on this. This was a plan for this. It was called an insurance policy by some top officials. This was a plan from the very beginning. They could not believe. Look, you have people, ladies and gentlemen, who are good, wonderful people who disown friends and family for voting Trump. This is a cycle, like Trump derangement. There has to be some kind of, psychological or emotional evaluation. It's not rational. It's completely irrational. Okay, Trump is not the end of the world. He's just a Republican. He's a, the modern day Republican, an anti-endless war Republican. And a Republican that actually cares about the working class that Democrats and never Trump Republicans don't care about. And that's why he's, like I say, he's doing things, when they said he's doing things Republicans wouldn't. Yes, that's why he won. My God. The entire, the rebuttal to Trump for 10 years, he's not a normal Republican. Yeah, that's why he won. Do you not understand that? Oh, my God. It never ceases to amaze me. It's like, yes, that's why Trump won. He's not a normal Republican. He's going to enforce immigration laws. He's going to impose tariffs, which are short-term. It's leverage, my God. It's a tax. Not when you're bringing home jobs, genius. And you're addressing the scourge of outsourcing that causes poverty. Democrats want working groups and studies on everything. Oh, there's a study on this, a study on that. You don't need a study. You don't need a working paper, a working group. Outsourcing causes poverty in the areas or regions where jobs leave. This is very simple to understand. Even the highly educated, morally superior, and all the economists can understand this either. Also, it's very simple. Trump is addressing that. And so the same people who want, again, the left is, they're like, oh, Medicare for all, single payer. Well, do you think maybe $8 billion lost in terms of fraud and waste in Minnesota? Maybe that hurts the possibility of having a single payer. Maybe importing or allowing millions upon millions of people makes it even less feasible to implement a Medicare for all. And then public health. Maybe public health also, when you're not forcing certain, well, that's a whole other story. But they were, it's unbelievable. When you were a citizen 5 years ago, you had to go through a million different hoops. Not so for other individuals. And then they bring up, the buzzwords left and right. Anyway, let's continue. Hit subscribe if you're new. Be here 2 seconds, 2-3 minutes after this live stream. We'll have an upload on H.A. Goodman's other channel.
John Brennan brought together the National Security Council, President Obama, Vice President Biden, Clapper, Comey, Susan Rice, and briefed them on this intelligence about a Hillary Clinton plan to frame Donald Trump, and that the CIA made the required referral of that to the FBI to investigate that as a counterintelligence matter. And as John Durham found, the FBI buried it. They didn't open a file. They didn't assign an analyst. They didn't investigate it all. They just spent the next few years, really, amplifying the lie of Hillary Clinton's Steele dossier and burying the truth of her plan to frame Donald Trump. It is the greatest political scandal that we hopefully will be the last that we'll see in our lifetime.
Speaking of amplify, Director, I want you to amplify a point that you just made, because you and I both know John Brennan, the New York Times, they're still in denial. They're claiming that none of this has been verified.
Well, they have to, Trey. They have to, because to do otherwise would be to confess their guilt. My critics in this regard, Brennan and Comey and Clapper, they said I was wrong about there was no Russia collusion. They said I was wrong that Hunter Biden's laptop was real. Of course I was right. I was telling the truth. Our intelligence reflected that, and the same is true here. This intelligence is real. And for Comey and Brennan and Clapper to say otherwise would be to confess their guilt, to say that they gave false testimony, that they misled Congress, that they obstructed justice. So they have to put up these straw man arguments saying, well, we stand by our assessment that Russia meddled in the 2016. Well, that wasn't their argument. Their argument was that this was unprecedented, that Donald Trump was potentially committing treason, that he was an agent of a foreign power. And so, they have to take that point. And
again, how could Russia have meddled when the Clinton campaign and DNC wanted to elevate Trump? I should have had that article up already. Next segment I do on this will have that article up. I mean, they wanted to elevate Trump. So it's like, how can you have the DNC and Russia want to elevate Trump at the same time? Politico ran a story, I think, like a day before Clinton lost. They got the man they always wanted. That was the title, something like that. And so it's like, it's just, there are so many holes. From the very beginning, the whole thing was complete nonsense. But you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, we went from a generation where the greatest calamity, the worst thing to happen, was the Great Depression, World War II. And then you fast forward, the worst thing that could have happened to people the past 10 years with Trump winning. We went from an electorate that understood what poverty and what a true predicament, or not just, it's not just a comeback, their version of collapse, societal collapse, was literally being on the brink of starvation during the Great Depression. And then you fast forward, and then you had World War II, Vietnam War. Oh, then you fast forward to what was the greatest calamity politically people faced? Well, President Trump winning in 2016. It's like, for a great many people, it's their Great Depression. Literally, and both in terms of the impact of the actual Great Depression. It's like the end of the world for them. So you have a completely warped viewpoint of politics now.
And to the point of the New York Times and the Washington Post, the same thing. They don't want to admit that they wrote thousands of false stories, so they don't want to give back the Pulitzer Prizes that they gained for writing those false stories. So they're doing it to do anything other than to try and fight this and say that it's not real would be to admit their guilt, to admit they were wrong, and to admit that they deliberately misled the American people, which is exactly what they did.
Yeah, they also might want to read Hillary Clinton's campaign manager's sworn testimony, because he admits what you just said. They deny it, but we'll see what they say when they get under oath. Is there more to come from either you or FBI Director Patel? Are there more shoes to drop that we should be looking for?
Yeah, there are, Trey. So, people need to understand that, there is no Russia collusion hoax file cabinet at the FBI or at the CIA. We have to look for these documents, sometimes that are well hidden. You have to go trace through emails and look for signs and clues that would point you to. That's how I found John Brennan's notes, and that's how we found additional documents. I've talked with FBI Director Patel. He and I will be declassifying additional documents that show just how sinister the FBI was in amplifying Hillary Clinton's Steele dossier as real and credible to be included in the intelligence community assessment, but also in how they buried the counterintelligence referral memo that I mentioned before, how they went to great lengths to try and keep that out of the intelligence community assessment. So there will be more to come, and I think that people should expect that the Trump administration will continue to shed transparency and light and truth, again, because, Trey, there is no question, this was the greatest political scandal of our lifetime. No one wants to see this happen again. It derailed our country. It derailed President Trump's presidency, his first 4 years in office, and it really is a stain on our country that should never happen again, and Donald Trump is committed to making sure that it doesn't.
generational damage is what I think was done, Director. But thank goodness that you found the Brennan notes. To your point, they're not like laying in a file cabinet. You got to go looking for them. And I do wonder, you're too modest to comment, but I do wonder if you had been picked to be the FBI director instead of Chris Wray, would it have taken a decade for this to come to light? You don't have to answer because I will. I don't think so. Director John Lee Ratcliffe, now of the CIA.
So it took 10 years to go from John Brennan to John Ratcliffe, from James Clapper to Tulsi Gabbard, and from James Comey to Kash Patel, and from Sessions, who was an abomination, and Barr to Pam Bondi. But it's happening, ladies and gentlemen, and media is slowly acknowledging that this is all taking place. Clinton's own campaign manager testified to the Durham probe, stating not only that Clinton agreed to give Trump Russia material, but that there was a plan. The plan was literally paid for. They literally paid for a 10-year McCarthy-era hoax. It's really unbelievable. And they got fined for it, too. And again, all these people now are going to be indicted for conspiracy. These are declassified documents. Declassified documents from the ODNI and from the Durham probe investigation. Okay, hit subscribe to this channel. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. I'll be uploading a segment in about 3-4 minutes. And be here tonight around 9:30, 9:45 for the evening live stream. We'll do 3 live streams a day, every day on this channel.